it's worth us challenging ourselves as CTOs to ask ourselves, hey, are there parts of the way that the engineering organization is behaving that may inadvertently undermine the perception of urgency?
Welcome to Kickoff, protect me from the where CTOs share the tales and the comments. From startups to big names, innovations unfold. How many CTOs will share their stories untold? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take? My name is Scott Porad, and I am here with my trusty co-host,
Brad Hefta-Gaub.
Brad. What do we have on tap today?
We have, I think we have an interesting topic to talk about. I
Let's
think
talk
that,
about it. What is it?
yeah. Well, first of all, I thought you posted something on LinkedIn recently that I was kind of like, oh, that's a cool hot take.
Mhm.
And it was this idea that like the wrong question to ask is, can the engineering team do it? And the right question to ask is, when can the engineering team have it done? And
Yes.
I think that there must have been something behind that post. I have a feeling you were thinking about something when you made that post.
You think that post was a reaction to maybe
I
an
think there's
experience I
I
had?
think it's possible you might have been reacting to an experience, and I would love to hear more about that.
It was pretty simple. I was faced with a stakeholder who was asking, "Can you do something?" And it was, well, we have a plan that's filled. The company I work for right now is pretty good about long-term planning. A lot of companies aren't, but we have a 3-year strategic plan. We have a 1-year plan for what our engineering team is going to do. And then we do quarterly planning, and then we do sprints. And nothing is really set in stone until you get to quarterly planning. We strive to complete 80% of the things in a quarter that we set out to complete. I refer to that as schedule accuracy. I'm going to go on a tangent for a second. I run an online software system, a website, a mobile app. We do two things. We've got two jobs. We operate a system and we develop a system. And I think the most important KPI that I have yet to find for the performance of the development side of the team is schedule accuracy. And that's because schedule accuracy for to get that right forces the team to do a lot of other things right. You have to understand the requirements. You have to understand how your system works. You have to understand what you're really going to do to change it. You got to break that down into small enough bits that you can estimate it. You got to not write buggy code, otherwise the project you had lined up next, you're going to spend all your time going into that time. So just a lot of stuff has to happen right.
I think it's a great metric. You've talked about that in the past, and I agree with you that it's a really good metric. Because it also kind of accounts for sandbagging, right? Like if a team's getting more than 100% of what they estimated done, or they're getting 100% estimated done, they probably were sandbagging a little.
Yeah, that's why we aim for 80 to challenge ourselves a little bit. And but to be close enough that the company can rely on you to get things done. Because I have a hypothesis, I have a bunch of hypotheses. One of them is reliability is more valuable than speed. I use an expression all the time. There's no point in going fast if you still show up late.
Wait, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let's
Okay, I'll
let that
say it
one
again
sink
more
in for a second.
slowly. There's no point in going fast if you still show up late.
Yeah,
If you're zipping around at 100 miles an hour, but you still get to your destination behind when you wanted to get there, what was the point?
yeah,
Al-
that's a good one. I
Also,
like it.
these companies that we all work for depend on us to do the engineering. Nobody else cooks it for the engineering team. And a lot of other teams, well, they're depending on us frequently to make their plans. When should we launch the new thing? When do we need to do the marketing around it? When does support need to get their training around it? When should we account for maybe the revenue in the financial plan? When should the sales team start preparing its materials to go out and doing all these? Everyone's depending on us, right? And my experience is simply it's more valuable to the company to be dependable and deliver so that everybody else can orchestrate, so we can all orchestrate together around what we're doing and get this to market. Than let's say you could get it there a little faster, but those times when you miss and you're not there on time, it really throws a wrench in everybody's gears across your whole company, right? No matter how big your company is.
Totally.
So I always strive when I come into an engineering team that maybe is not performing as well as it should be. The first place I say is, hey, let's get dependable. If we're going to deliver when we say we're going to deliver. I like to use the expression, if I can hammer something into the shape of a software project, we can get it across the finish line. And then once you do that, I genuinely believe in my heart, I believe that most people are trying to work as hard and take pride as they can. They're try to um, get stuff done as fast as they can. Start showing up on time first, then start trying to figure out how to optimize whatever you're doing to go faster, as opposed to the other way around, which is you might get stuff done, but the times you don't, you really disrupt the rest of the company. So that's why I lean on schedule accuracy. And then once we get to that point where you are delivering, then you start to say, well, what can we do to still be reliable, but be reliable faster?
I think that makes a ton of sense, and I think it's worth pausing for a second to kind of let that think sink in, right?
Hmm.
And part of the reason I think it's important to pause for a second and let that sink in is because of another theme that we've talked a lot about is that for non-technical product stakeholders,
Hmm.
a lot of what we do is completely mysterious
Hmm.
and it's like an enigma. And so if it's one thing to be like, well, I don't really understand what it is that you guys do over there in engineering.
Hmm.
Like, I know I can describe what I want, and then you guys deliver it. Um, and so, if when I describe what I want, you are really unreliable in what you say it's going to take you to do it,
Hmm.
that just further increases that mystery, which further erodes trust, which is
Trust,
such
trust,
a critical thing for you to be building with your stakeholders is trust.
trust, trust, trust. Yeah, absolutely.
And so to your point, like you're sort of like I think you're starting to hint to this other topic, which is the okay, yeah, sure, you delivered what you said you were going to deliver, and you even delivered it on time with 80% accuracy, but are you sure you couldn't have gone faster?
Yeah.
Right. And so before we, to your point, like before we start talking about like, are we going as fast as we could be going? It at the minimum, if we don't have a foundation of like, I trust that when you tell me you're going to get something done,
Hmm.
you're going to get it done.
Yeah,
Like if we're missing that, well then, like going to your, to your great little adage, what's the point in going faster if you don't get there on time?
that's right.
Or what's the point in going faster if you didn't get to the right place?
Yeah, that's right. It's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, everything we do either generates trust or erodes trust. And there are a lot of things, every department in an organization needs its other departments for different reasons, one way or the other, to just trust them. Hey, trust me, I need to do this upgrade, is something I might say. The finance team might say, I don't know, trust me, I need to account. I don't know what, I don't actually don't know what a thing is, but like every department needs
Well,
it.
trust me, we can't afford to have all these employees. We need to cut costs.
Yeah, yeah, or yeah, whatever it is. So we all need to have that trust. And to me, the foundation of trust with engineering is, like I said, at least for an online system, do you deliver when you say you're going to deliver? Because on the software development side and on the operational side, is my system up and running? And if it's not up and running, do you respond rapidly? Like to me, those are like the three components of trust. And there's a fourth I would put in there, which is, are you operating within your budget? And like those are all really clear signals that are happening all the time that our stakeholders can use as signals and proxies for like when these people say to trust me about something, like they want to go upgrade the flux capacitor and I don't understand why they want to do it, and it has no impact on our business, supposedly, our business as we can measure it, I need to trust them. So, okay, so this comes all the way back to the when. Now, don't ask us if, ask us when. So we have a fairly good planning, but we have a year's worth of, at any given time, we have a year's worth of work mapped out, right? And then we lock a quarter in, and of course we lock in sprints. And so a particular stakeholder this week was asking me, can you guys do this? And kind of pressuring, can you do it? Can you do it? And it was kind of a squirmy conversation. And then it was like, well, yeah,
Was this,
we,
by the way, just for context, was this something that was getting essentially added into the roadmap that was completely unconsidered? At the during the yearly planning process, the quarterly planning process, whatever that might be.
yeah,
How hot off the presses was
yeah,
this
it
idea?
was. It was a thing that's come up. And there, those happen from time to time. And so they're asking if we can do it. And I kind of realized like, well, that's the wrong question. Like, of course we can do this. It's a question of prioritization, which is like, when can we do it? Like, we could do it tomorrow if you wanted us to. We would have to stop these other things that we're working on, right? And in my judgment, you shouldn't stop those things. You should slot it in at this particular point in time.
So you just touched on two different parts of the when that I think are
Okay.
also really important for us to tease apart, and that is like there's the like how much effort would it take you to do it,
Hmm.
right? So like can it be done? Probably the answer is yes. Like I often say like look, it's all just software. We can do
Right.
anything, right? So the answer to the can it be done is almost always going to be a yes, it can be done. But then to your point, there's the question of when can it be done by, and that's a mix of how much effort will it take to do it, and what other things is it competing with,
Yes.
and that's very important to then turn and put that accountability onto your stakeholders to say, look, we're operating against a set of priorities that we agreed to. We can always change those priorities,
Hmm.
but introducing something new to the priority list definitionally impacts the other things that we previously agreed to do.
That's right. Now, here's something which is this is great that we have a podcast about CTOs, because here's something where I think a lot of engineers are uncomfortable with. And I think I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I think it's helped me in my career, which is sometimes that stakeholder, CEO, head of product ever, they need a thought partner, right? If we just say, you tell me the priorities, that's kind of shoving into their face, right? Lots of times,
Totally.
I just did this today, as a matter of fact. Said, well, look, here's what it is. Here's how much work it's going to be. Here's taking off my CTO hat for a second and just putting on my steward of the business hat. Here's my recommendation where we should slot it in. I think we should slot it in after this project and before this project. That's what I think. That I've found that's helpful to the stakeholder a lot. At least it's just something for them to react to and say, no, that's not the right spot. I think it should go here. But it's a much more collaborative. As long as I keep grounded, or the CTO keeps grounded, is like ultimately it's this other person's decision, whoever the owns prioritization. But I've found just shoving in their face, well, you have to prioritize it, gets me nowhere. But saying, look, here's what I would do. And I just did this morning. I just said, look, we were talking about another thing, which is like, kind of getting at it. And I was like, there was some urgency about, making a decision fast on it. And I was just like, look, I don't think we're going to prioritize this ahead of anything we have in the next quarter. And I sort of listed off the big projects in the next quarter. So there's not a lot of urgency to make this decision until we start planning for the subsequent quarter. And that actually kind of took some stress out of the room, because everyone's like, oh yeah, that's right, we're not going to prioritize it against any of that other stuff. And so I think sometimes as a CTO, you can be a business partner to the stakeholders,
100%.
and we're not always business people, because that's not our training. But it's not our first rodeo either. We've seen a thing or two, and you can be helpful.
I also think that like another uh, part of that like collaborative conversation around like where do I want to prioritize this? Where do I recommend that you
Mhm.
prioritize this? There's obviously like the implications to the business, like oh, is this revenue generating? Is this saving costs? Is this meeting the needs of a particular high profile customer? Like those are good things to include in that. How do we prioritize? But another thing that stakeholders really often need to know is well, how expensive what's your gut about how
For
expensive
sure.
this is going to
Yeah.
be, right? Because a lot of times it's like if it's a if it's something that feels like a nice to have that you assume, because again we're like taking that product idea and turning it into functioning code is such a mystery often to these non-technical stakeholders. If they're like, I genuinely thought this was going to be a super easy ask that was going to take like one developer and Claude code like an afternoon. The only reason I was prioritizing this high is because I thought it would be really simple and easy. Um, well, no, turns out here's the implications of that. Here's the likely cost of that. And because of that, my recommendation is it should be here relative to these other like cost reward ROI type
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
Like they can't have an ROI conversation if they don't know the I,
Yeah, that's exactly
right?
right. It's so interesting you say that because again, gosh, today's the day. I had a conversation with somebody about that part today. I think our organization is pretty good at like a detailed product requirement document, a detailed technical design document, a detailed estimate. We're not great at like the low fidelity. Like, hey, just give me a one pager for your requirements, a one pager for the design, and we'll give you a rough estimate. It's something our organization, we're getting better at it, but we're not great at it. And I was actually challenged today with this very same conversation I was telling you about from this morning. We were talking about something that had no estimate, and I was like, look, I mean, I'm really shooting from the seat of my pants, but I think if you gave me 12 engineers for a year, I could get it done. But like, I need you guys to really understand, like, there's four parts of this, and like one, two, three, four. Like one, we understand the solution. Two, we understand the solution, but it's got a lot of scope variability. And like four, like we don't even know. Like we have no idea how to like. I mean, if someone spends 2 hours thinking about this, we'll know. But like nobody's thought about it yet, right? So I'm just really guessing. So yeah, as a CTO, you got to be able to do that and stick your neck out a little bit. Um, and it does come with experience, and also, like I was just saying a minute ago, knowing how to really message those to the stakeholders, like, hey, I need you to understand I'm shooting from my hip right now. Like, and the takeaway from the meeting I just had, to close the loop on this story, is we walked away saying, hey, we need some people to go get us a little bit better estimates. We want to run an experiment to understand the impact of one of the changes that we might make. Um, and we want to do a little bit better financial modeling of what we think the costs and benefits are. And so to me, that's very natural, like cone of uncertainty. We went from a month ago, very uncertain to slightly more certain, and we weren't still yet certain whether we wanted to make decisions. So we said, well, let's take another step and just do a little bit more work to just feel it out and see if this is something we want to invest in.
By the way, at the risk of getting too self-helpy woo-woo
Yeah.
or something, I'll acknowledge that, like, decades ago, reading The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey,
Hmm.
one of the things that really struck me was that whole notion of the four quadrants,
Hmm.
right? Of, you know, urgent, not urgent, important, not important. And it feels to me like there's this interesting thing that happened in your story there where somebody came to the table with this is important and urgent,
Hmm.
right? Like we need to solve this now. And in the Covey model, it's like, okay, that's the quadrant you want to manage things. You want to manage things that are in that quadrant. And then things that are in the important, not urgent quadrant, that's where you really want to focus your time. That's the place you get the most leverage. And what you did, it sounds like in your story, what you did was you actually took somebody who was kind of reacting in an urgent, important way, and you were able to like collaborate on it in a way that you shifted it into the not urgent, important zone. And that's
I have.
where you're able to kind of go like, hey, is it really urgent right now? Do we have time to do this right? Do
Hmm.
we have time to focus on it appropriately? And if you're able to do that that's like a really powerful technique to help turn down chaos
Yeah.
and turn up quality and focus.
Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. But I have a question for you. I
Yeah.
have the word urgency is a trigger word for me. So in that 2 by 2, urgent and important, versus each other, the quadrants, what does urgency mean?
Yeah.
Does it mean time sensitive?
Yeah, I think it means time sensitive. In Covey's language, he uses that to mean time sensitive.
Okay, so important and time sensitive. Yeah, that.
If it's important and sensitive, that means it's like it's kind of like you know, it's like a firefighting thing that's
Mhm.
real firefight,
Yeah.
and you got to be good at delegating, and you should sort of like, you know, it's crises and pressing problems. That's just like you have to manage, you have to block it and tackle it, right?
Hmm.
Um, if it's like, and then the stuff that's like, another good example of this is like the urgent and not important, right? Well, that's just like busy work. It's like interruptions and that stuff you got to get really good at just like avoiding. Like just
Hmm.
like no,
Hmm.
no, that's not important. We're not going to focus on that right now. That's not a thing that we worry about. Um, you sort of have that also like in the bottom quadrant of like not important and not urgent.
Yeah.
That's like bike shedding
Yeah.
or like distractions,
Yeah.
right? And those you definitely need to like create a culture that limits that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So it's really kind of like the way I think about this quadrant. It's like um, in business all the time we're going to have this sense of urgency that's going to happen where like this is time sensitive. I need to solve this right now.
Hmm.
And so like, and then you have other stuff that's like, um, it almost feels like if you're, like a big part of like this urgency important quadrant is this idea of like it feels like you're doing good work. A lot of people get trapped in the like I'm dancing as fast as I can. Everything I'm doing feels really urgent,
Hmm.
right? And the insight is like that's not where you're going to do your best work.
Hmm.
And so the first step is for you to answer the question, well, is it really urgent or not,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And there's a lot of things that feel urgent in the moment that you can actually say that turns out that's not that urgent,
Hmm.
right? And then once you've kind of like dealt with this, like, is it urgent or not? Then you can kind of like split the vector of is it important or not,
Hmm.
right? And the not important things are the stuff you want to get rid of.
For sure.
But if you're stuck there in the urgency zone, everything feels important, right? Like if you're stuck in that sense of time
Hmm.
sensitivity, it's really hard to distinguish like is this important or not.
Hmm.
Anyway, you started to talk about like the word urgency.
Well, yeah. So that's a different definition that I think triggers me. I when I've had bosses in the past, stakeholders, one sort or the other, say to me, I just don't feel like the team is acting with enough urgency. And
I've, I I can't. I don't think I've ever had a business stakeholder who hasn't said that to me at least
I
once in
know.
my relationship with them.
Yeah. And what do you think they mean by that?
Well, I mean, first of all, that's called capitalism, right? Like, even if we're doing great, shouldn't we be moving even faster? That's like it's all about like driving greater, further, growth from a
Yeah.
capitalism economic perspective.
Yeah. I often think about like, well, what are the things, let's say you think the team is working hard and getting stuff done on time and delivering value, et cetera, et cetera. But because of capitalism, the stakeholder's always going to say that. So then I think to myself, and I haven't cracked this yet, but I'm curious, like, well, what would the signals or attributes or whatever, what is it that would make the stakeholder feel like the team was acting urgently?
Well, that's a great question. Um, one of the one way to answer that question might be, what are the signals and the symptoms and the signs that make them feel like the team's not acting urgently,
Yeah.
right?
I think the biggest symptom or signal or sign is that I'm not getting the changes to the product as fast as I want them.
Do you think that that speaks to that whole mystery, the enigma of like, what is it you guys are doing over there anyway?
In part, I think there's another piece to it, and this is a little philosophical. So on my street, across the street, somebody is building a new house. They tore down what was there, they're building a new house. And I think the world, or at least the world I live in, generally speaking, understands a house takes roughly somewhere between 9 and 18 months to get built. You know, some companies can build them faster, some houses are more complex, but on average, it's somewhere in that range. Because lots of houses have been built and we've all sort of seen it, and there's lots of contractors that have told us that's how long it takes, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, uh, you know, all software is totally bespoke. Nobody's built it before. And so there's no like generally accepted sort of societal understanding of how long something should take. I've had stakeholders say to me like, "Well, I think it only should take you guys like 2 or 3 months to build this." And I'm like, "How on earth would you know? I don't even know. I mean, like, what makes you think you have any idea how long this should take, right?" Or when people say like, "Why is it taking so long? Why can't you do it faster?" And it's like, "What do you mean? Why can't, nobody in the world knows how long this? We just figured out for the first time how long this is going to take, and no one's ever done it before." So I think there's this big piece of like, as a culture, as an industry, nobody has any sort of common understanding of what things take. And then I think I think there's a few things that really mess that up. I think vendors screw this up. I was watching a vendor presentation recently about, the software they wanted us to buy, and they're like showing it to us. And they're like, it's so easy to get this set up. You just run this command line, and within 60 seconds, you're already up and running. And I was in the room with like my CEO, and everybody was in this room, and I was just like, my heart dropped because I was like, okay, wait a second, this person's not going to deploy this from their laptop. Like, yes, they can now code in this environment on their laptop, but they're not going to run this. They're not going to deploy from their laptop. So I mean, let's just talk
Yeah.
about a bunch of little things. Someone's got to set up a repo for this thing. Someone's got to set up a build pipeline for this thing. It's got to get built and go somewhere. So unless you've got a really nice like kind of infinitely or automatically scalable container infrastructure, someone's got to set up a little bit of infrastructure. Like there's a bunch of stuff to sort of productionalize. Someone's going to put the monitoring on it and the alerts on it and all that stuff. But then the CEO hears 60 seconds. And all of a
Right,
sudden you come back
exactly.
and they're like, well, I mean, it's going to take us 2 months. And they're like, but the vendor said 60. In fact, just to be very clear, that vendor, we told that vendor it was going to take, I can't remember, let's just say we said it was going to take 40 developer weeks. I can't remember what the number was. The vendor came back and said, well, we think it should only take 12. And now I'm anchored on, I'm not personally anchored to that. I get anchored to that. Well, why is it taking you longer than 12? Oh, because this person who's trying to sell you something told you that's what they thought? Like,
Well, this to me, Scott, is exactly the point that we kind of started with, which is like, it's so important that that the engineering team builds trust with the
yeah,
stakeholders.
for sure.
And I can't count the number of times that you've been brought. How many times have you been brought in as a CTO or fractional CTO, and like the mission, the statement is like, "Gosh, I just feel like that the engineering team is underperforming,"
Hmm.
right? And you're like, "Well, okay, that if that's what you're hiring me to figure
Hmm.
out, then let me tell you what I'm gonna do. Is I'm gonna go look, and I'm gonna look at people, process, and technology,
Hmm.
and probably." Probably you should just know that it's not going to be one of those things.
Hmm.
It's probably going to be a pretty healthy mix of all three of those things are impacting. And when we talk about process, it could be that the engineering team has a really great process, but they're not getting good guidance about what to build,
Hmm.
you know? And so it could be that the reason it takes so long is because product team keeps changing their mind, or the product team doesn't really know what they want, or they, and it could be we have a bunch of engineers that aren't good. Like that could be.
And it,
Like it could be that.
it could be your
Um,
expectations for what sufficiently fast enough is unrealistic. It could be your appetite for change to the system, updates, new features, whatever, is insatiable, right? And no matter no matter how fast this team was going, you wouldn't be. That's most of my experience. No matter how fast the team is going, it's insatiable. In part, as an industry, we have no agreed upon way to measure productivity.
yeah.
And
Well, and
that's,
that's why you started out. That's why you started out by saying like I feel like the way to measure this is estimation accuracy,
yeah.
right?
I want to present a slightly different framework from people, process, and technology
Sure,
that was
I'm open.
presented to me recently within the last 6 months, and actually by our head of product uh, rolled this out there, and it's actually served us really well. And he basically said, look, our team plus our environment do not equal our ambition, or do not, like, our ambition is greater than what our team and environment can do. So we have some choices here, right? We can lower our ambitions, and ambition can be how much you want to do or how fast you want your business to grow or whatever it is. We can figure out how to create an environment where people can serve those ambitions, or we can adjust the people. And
And that environment, just if I can double check on that, that environment is kind of what I would generally lump process and technology into.
yeah, but there's other pieces in there too. Like, I'll give you two examples from uh, our environment. One is like our financial profile. So we're in a low margin business. And so as a result, we're not Microsoft with 90% margins. We got low margins. And so the nature of a low margin business is the nature of different than the nature of a high margin business. You can't, you don't, in a high margin business, every customer you add like generates a lot of profit for you. Whereas in a low margin business, you got to add a lot of customers. So that's one piece. We're a privately held company. So that has a different, that's a different dimension to the dynamic, which is our owner has different expectations than, say, a venture capitalist would have. And those affect, if we have venture capital size ambitions in terms of the growth and wanting to take over market, but the way we're funded by the people that own our company fund us in a steady growth type of way, or we're willing to fund it in that way. If we say, hey, we want you guys to give us $25 million or $100 million to go do this thing, they'd be like, "Were you nuts? That's not how we operate." So that's part of the environment. Certainly, culture could be part of the environment or part of the team. I'm not sure which one. It's probably more part of the team.
I throw it in the environment.
But I think there's a lot of different parts of that environment that can shape, what the team and the environment, what they can produce, and does that match what you want it to produce? And that's actually been a useful tool for us to help understand some of the challenges that we have. We have things that are going very well. It's been a good year for us, but we also have challenges, and that's sort of been a useful tool. And I think that actually fits a little bit with this urgency question. Like, we got these big ambitions, and we got things that allow us, that people don't feel like we're moving fast enough, being urgent enough towards those ambitions. One of the things I've come to at least in this world I'm living in right now, my gut is it's 80% environment, 20% people. Like, you could take it. You remember the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and the
Right,
Duke
right.
brothers? They substituted out Dan Aykroyd for Billy Ray Valentine, and they changed their behavior. We could get rid of 100% of the people, bring in 100% new people. They're still going to be dealing with environmental challenges.
By the way, that's why I put culture into environment because
Yeah,
that's
that's right.
it's more. I mean, if you get rid of 100% of the people, you're going to have a different culture. But if you're swapping people out, the culture is persistent.
Yeah, that's right. You might get a different culture, but you're still going to have low margins. You're still going to have whoever owns your company. You're still going to have your tech stack that you have to deal with, et cetera. So I'm trying to get my team and both the leadership team I'm a part of and my engineering team and product team to understand what can we do to change our environment.
Well, okay, so I first of all, I love this framework that you're
Mhm.
talking about. I think it's a great framework, and I agree with you that I agree with the person that introduced it to you, your product owner that introduced it to you. It's like, yeah, if you can have a completely, out of sync mismatch between your ambitions and your environment and people, then that's gonna be a problem,
Mhm.
right? And so, like, you use the examples of the way you guys are structured as a private company versus venture capital. The same types of issues would exist in somebody that's bootstrapping, a business or
Yeah.
a small business. It's so these differences in environment are super important. I agree with you, but I feel like I want to come back to the question I asked you earlier, which is instead of asking the question, what are the attributes that make you think would make you feel like the team was acting with correct
Mhm.
urgency? I asked the question, well, what are the signs and symptoms that that they are associating with a lack of urgency? And I feel a little bit like there's it's worth us challenging ourselves as CTOs to ask ourselves, hey, are there parts of the way that the engineering organization is behaving that may inadvertently undermine
Mm.
the perception of urgency?
Yeah. Well, I can say one for sure. We talked about it already. In fact, how we got part of how we got into this conversation. Don't ask me if, ask me when, because given the set of engineers I have, the number of people we have on the team, there's a very that much people have much bigger ideas, many more things they want us to do than we have time to do at any given moment. So, most of the time we're saying, well, we'll stick it in the backlog, right? So we're frequently giving this signal of not inadvertently giving the signal of not doing things for you, right? And might reinforce it kind of as an undercurrent, just reinforce that this team just never can get stuff done. They're always just like, we'll do it later, you know?
Well, yeah, totally. So that's a great example where um, it's possible that maybe if you interrogate that dynamic, you might be able to make some adjustments in the way that you talk to each other that might help flip that script and
Mm,
people feel more heard,
yeah,
right?
that's right. What do you think some other things are?
Well, I'll give you an example of something that I just ran into that I think is I feel like this might be an example of the type of thing that creates this sense of a lack of urgency. Um, so uh, I was doing this evaluation on this organization, and one of the things I noticed in the language that they were using was, "Do I need to get designs for this? Like, do I need to get design involved to do designs for
Hmm.
this?" And I was talking to the CEO stakeholder, and they were like, "Hey, oh, there's a plan, but do I need designs for this?" And my reaction to that was, "No, this is shovel ready. Like, if you really, really want like a very specific pixel perfect design, right? And you have a specific aesthetic you're looking for, then get design involved. But that's going to add an extra step. That's going to add some cost. But if you're just happy with the idea that like, yeah, have the developer add a button and just move on, then don't overcomplicate
Hmm.
things. Don't add extra steps that you don't necessarily need,
Hmm.
right? And I've seen this dynamic happen all the time, right? Like as a development team, we're waiting around for, the Figma, right? Where a lot of times it's like, just add the button,
Hmm.
right? We already have just add the new button. Just say add a button, you know? So to me, that's a small example where and we maybe we can talk about it in the context of like core values and stuff like this, right? Like if the environment slash culture has created this mechan this dynamic where people feel that they don't want to start working until it's very fleshed out,
Hmm.
then that I believe sends a signal of kind of like reluctance
Hmm.
to move,
Yeah.
reluctance to act,
Not a bias for action, a bias for,
not a bias
yeah.
for action. It's a bias for CYA,
Yeah. Yeah. So
right?
like bureaucracy, like, hey, we have to check this with legal. We have to check this, we have to check this with design. We got to check it with the information security team, whatever. It's all stuff that makes people, stakeholders feel like, why aren't you just going for it?
Why aren't you just going for it? And I think there's a lot of reasons why that can get created in the environment.
Mhm.
And I think that so that's an example where if you're seeing that going on, I think there's an opportunity there to sort of like break down some barriers in a way that really would have positive impacts to you, the feelings of your stakeholders of like, wow, they're moving way faster, you know?
Well, let me counter that for a second. Maybe the reason that person says, should I go talk to design, is because at some point some engineer didn't talk to design and
Oh
shipped
yeah, and they got
something.
punished.
Yeah, and that punishment isn't always like not a big punishment, not like a you're fired or you're got a demerit or you're getting something in your review. The punishment can just be something like in a meeting, a superior, whether it's the CEO or a VP or someone says like, well, who did that button? That looks terrible, right?
Yeah,
You
100%.
know,
That would be devastating punishment, I think, for the average
and
engineer.
and and the engineer might say, well, I did it, I just kind of went for it, and then it's like, well, look, quality is really important here, right? We shouldn't be shipping things without having them go through design. And so there's
Boom.
it's
You by saying that as the leader,
mhm.
if the CEO said that, quality is really important. We shouldn't like you just inadvertently created an environment where things are going to feel less urgent.
Okay, so these are all things where we might make our stakeholders not experience urgency. I kind of interested in the opposite though, which is like, imagine I had a team that was working really hard, and I think I do. How do we convey? I'm going to get some like coaching from you. How do we convey that to our stakeholders? Short of the most effective way, of course, which is a terrible way. Okay. Oh yeah, the team's been working nights and weekends.
Yeah, no, that's a bad way.
Oh,
Here's a quick example. Now, this is admittedly a smaller team, so this technique
mhm.
worked pretty well in the scale of the team that I was working with. But I have a feeling I'll describe it, and then maybe we could figure out a way to scale it up to a larger thing. But there was like, the question. One of the questions that came from my stakeholders is like, oh well, like, uh, I'll use an example here that's kind of a somewhat made up example, but like, oh well, like, what's 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 QA doing? Like, what are they doing? Like, tell me, like, am I getting value out
Hmm.
of that? Right? And I basically kind of I was like, oh, that's really a good point. Like, there's this dashboard, our sprint planning dashboard, where you can clearly see like stuff moving, left to
Hmm.
right. The development team has got stuff moving left to right, and eventually ends up in done. But we didn't have like a visual place where QA was doing
Hmm.
something,
Hmm.
right? So I was like, went to the QA guy and said, hey, let's tweak this board a little bit. So there's like a spot where like you guys do your
Yeah,
work,
you can see it.
right? And then I went to the stakeholders and said, you know what? You're going to see what QA is doing because there's this lane there and stuff ends up there, and if it sits there before it's done, they got to get it out of there, right? So you'll definitionally see them doing their work because there's that level of the testing lane,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
verification lane, and you see stuff get in it, and then you see stuff go out of it. And if you go look at any moment in that dashboard, you're gonna see like a little, little RPMs meter that shows that something's happening there. And that was a huge, yeah, it was a huge transformation. It was a great exercise in building trust, and it gave that department, QA department, like this, like a sense of accomplishment, right? Like, oh yeah, you know what? I was working really hard. Now I have a way of showing you that.
Okay, as you talked about QA, you gave me a clue of another item that could be one that cuts ourselves, where we cut our nose off to spite our face, but also that we could address. You know, I haven't. When I'm running, right now I'm managing a large team, so I'm not running an engineering team day to day. But when I have done that, I like to see tickets flow across the board, right? I'm a break stuff down small guy, right? That's
Yeah,
just how
I am too.
that's
I am too. I love
yeah,
it.
it's all my type A stuff. And so because it gives you a really good signal when a ticket is sitting there and it's like, hey, that thing has been in progress for 10 days now. Like what's going on with that guy, right? And so it gives you a really good signal. Okay, so engineering teams who are would it be that are um, doing large projects where the deliverable, not necessarily the tickets moving across, but the actual thing that gets shipped is large units of time, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, large units of time. Just like, that QA team saw tickets start flying across the board to the outside stakeholder, the CEO or whomever, they just see this one fat ticket sitting on their mental board for an entire quarter. What has your team been doing all quarter? You've only been working on this one thing and nothing's happened. Well, I mean, a million things have happened. We got all these tickets done. So, and sometimes it's hard, but breaking that stuff down into now the CEO's not really looking at the Kanban board, but like they've got a mental Kanban board of like that thing, you guys have just been working on that thing for so long. Nothing's happening, right? And so figuring out a way to break those large things down into smaller things is valuable. And I want to come back to Scrum for a second, because there's some things we can take out of Scrum for this. And they are everything at the end of a sprint should be shippable. The software should
Yeah,
be shippable at the end of a sprint, which
or
which
at
the
the very minimum, demonstrable.
demonstrable. And in the way we use Scrum these days, not just at my company, but everywhere, nobody does. I mean, that's a rule that gets violated all the time. And the sprint demo, as you mentioned, demonstrable, the sprint demo. And maybe perhaps a team can mitigate the feeling of lack of urgency by leveraging some of these techniques that are already in Scrum, which is break it down, get it complete or demonstrable by the end of the sprint, and demonstrate it. And that illustrates to the stakeholder, yeah, lots of stuff is happening. We're not sitting on a big fat ticket for 3 months sitting and in progress. We're flowing.
I think that is a huge, I think that's very important, and I think that's fully scalable, and I think it's one of the things that absolutely an organization can do to help communicate that there is a sense of urgency. I think that Scrum and Agile can get a bad name from people who feel like it kind of creates a lack of accountability. Like there's a version of Scrum that's like, hey, every 2 weeks I'm going to show you something, and then we're going to come back and tweak it if you didn't like it, right? Like there's a version
Hmm.
of Scrum Agile that feels like that to
Hmm.
people that are like, God, I was clear about what I wanted 3 months ago. Can you please just give it to me,
Hmm.
right? So you want to try to avoid like letting the Scrum
Hmm.
turn into
Hmm.
kind of just like check-ins where you're not seeing progress, right? That's going to undermine trust even more. But if
Hmm.
you are doing a good job of really sort of sequencing things and breaking things down, then these uh, periodic check-ins where we can show that we did what we said we were going to get done and it has this demonstrable element to it, I think is a very powerful way. Even for now, you have to with your non-technical stakeholders who kind of just have the big picture in mind, the whole house being done in mind. Um, you need to make sure that you tell them ahead of time. Hey, look, you know, after the first sprint, we're going to show you that we've got the architectural diagrams done. After the second sprint, we're going to show you that the foundation is in, and we've actually put up the framing, right? And you got to remind them like, hey, foundation, framing. Let me show you the architectural
Hmm.
diagrams. This is what's coming. That walk them like how many. I mean, you've either built a house or done a remodel,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like the general contractor walks you through the space and says, "Look at we've got all this
Hmm.
framing over here," and holds up. This is going to be your kitchen. This is going to be your kitchen someday.
Hmm. So I want to go back to urgency for a second to build on what you're saying. So I think when someone says, I don't feel a sense of urgency, what they're saying is, I don't feel like stuff is getting done fast enough. And I want to break that down to three things: stuff done fast enough. Okay. And so
Yep.
stuff we can set aside.
In a trustworthy way. In a trustworthy way. In a way that I trust that it's really getting done. The stuff I want is getting
Yeah,
done, and you're not wasting time doing
right.
it.
So
Time and
I
money
want to
doing it.
focus. So what we're really talking about is the first two parts of this. The sprint demo is stuff is getting done, right? So perhaps a big part of the not fast enough is the fact that the stakeholder, whoever they are, product manager, chief product officer, customer, CEO, whatever, if you solve the problem of them seeing stuff getting done, I have a hunch. I'm now today, as a result of this conversation, I have a hunch that you'll actually start to break into that feeling of fast enough, right? Because maybe the problem isn't really that stuff isn't getting done fast enough. It's I don't feel like stuff is getting done because I don't have any visibility
Exactly.
into stuff getting done.
And yes, 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 1,000 times yes. So establish trust. Establish that when we say we understand what the stuff is, and when we tell you how long we think it's going to take us to get it done, that you can trust us.
Hmm.
Now, let me demonstrate over time that I am delivering against what the stuff
Hmm.
that was getting done in the way that I told you it was going to be best for me to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, if you establish trust, you're building trust with each of those
Hmm.
sprint demos. You're
It
building trust with
becomes
each of those milestones.
self-reinforcing virtuous cycle.
It's a self-reinforcing virtuous cycle. Now, it's easy to screw that up. Like if you show up every sprint and you didn't get it done and you have nothing but excuses for why you didn't get it done, then it's going to be a reinforcing negative
Yep. And
cycle.
here's another example of where we cut our nose off to spite our face. So you say, maybe not as much in a smaller organization, but a bigger organization. Okay, we're going to have monthly or quarterly status updates, and there's a row there on the sheet which is like, you know, make this new thing for the customer, whatever the feature is, right? And it just says in progress, and it's every time the CEO gets the update, like this thing's just been in progress forever. You guys making any what progress are you
Right.
making on this thing? It's in progress. When will
Right.
it be done? It feels like it's been
And
months.
then God forbid it feels like it's been months and God forbid it slips. Because second it slips, like of course that's the other thing, right? Is the sort of like bad news needs to travel
Hmm.
fast early.
Hmm.
But the problem with software is you don't if you're not doing a good job of like having like small bite-sized
Yeah.
milestones that you know you're making progress against. If you just kind of have a big milestone, you kind of don't have the bad news until it's too late to make it travel
Yeah,
fast.
that's right.
so that's another so that's another thing, by the way. If that's happening in your organization, then I think you're sending a signal that is going to be interpreted as the team's not having a sense of urgency.
Okay, I want to digress on this for 1 second. I actually want to make one other point, but I want to come back to this for a second. So when we set up a project that's like say 5 months, and then we do monthly status updates with our senior leadership team. Well, we know for 4 of those months, we're just going to have them wondering. It's just going to say in progress, and they'll be like, "Well, what's going on here?" We're shooting ourselves in our foot. Okay, and then you just gave me a thought. We do these status updates. Everything starts out at the beginning of whatever time period is on track
Right.
until it's not on track. Then it becomes at risk, and then it becomes off track, right? And what you maybe
Right.
just think is, "Huh, I wonder if everything should start out at risk." And you don't get to
Yeah.
be on track until like you're really confident that this thing is going to land when it's supposed to land. Like
Yeah, that's an interesting tick. That's a way of it's a reframing that might really make a
because it's
difference.
true. I guarantee you.
At the beginning of the project, you are at the most at
Yeah,
risk. You have the least amount completed. You have the most uncertainty. You are definitionally the
the
most at
most at
risk.
risk. And we usually use at risk for when something starts to go wrong. We kind of want to, that's when we want to let bad news travel fast. Well, we better signal to our stakeholders that it's not quite going right. Let's say it's at risk, right? But what we really want to be doing is narrowing that cone of uncertainty, go from at risk to less risk to less risk to less risk. Maybe we start out at 100%. Maybe we should use a percentage there, and your percentage of risk can get lower as you get closer to the ship date. It should be 0 the day before you ship.
Yeah, well, there is that notion of like burn down
hmm
charts. Those are
Oh,
those are
I
a
love a
technique
burn down chart.
that that happens
I'm
there.
such a burn down chart
Um,
nerd. Okay, look, we've been talking for a long time here. For anybody who's listening to us, they can't believe they've been listening for a whole hour. This has been one of my favorite episodes, Brad.
it's a great topic. It's such a great topic, and I think that it strikes to the core of the job of the
hmm
CTO, right? Is navigating this very important trust building uh, dialogue between stakeholders and the
Yeah.
engineers.
This conversation has made me feel like we should rebrand our podcast to CTO therapy,
I think that's how we started this, isn't it?
basically. Well, it's been a delightful week.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me today, Scott, and talking about this. I love that you brought this topic. I think this was super fun. And for all our listeners, what do we say?
Subscribe,
Smash that subscribe
rate,
button.
smash. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate your time today.
All right. Have a good one. Talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
This episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast was edited by Saffron Hefta-Gaub. Our theme song was AI generated by Brad. Please follow us on all the social media platforms at HowManyCTOsPod. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, TikTok, and Patreon, or at our website at HowManyCTOsPod.com. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Thanks for listening.